Thanks for coming out today, and real psyched to have you all here. We have Dr. Ebert here from Pacific Shark Research Center at Moss Landing Marine Labs, and you've probably seen him or at least read about him in certain publications around the bay. That I've always been following his work the last couple of years, and he's a writer of a number of books about sharks. The World of Sharks is Sharks of the World. Sorry, Sharks of the World. It just gets coming out a new edition here, and a couple other books that he'll tell you about. But really psyched for this, and so let's give him a warm up.
Thanks, Jason. It's kind of cool to be able to have a chance to come and speak here locally. I'm a local guy working in Ferndale here, and have some of my friends from high school came here to join us this evening, so I'm kind of cool about that. I got to point out one, Lisa Ostrell, in the back. She's actually an alumni here at MIIS. Go back to high school, so I had to point that out. She has a real important job around here. So, anyway, thanks, Jason. And Jason mentioned I have one of the few books coming out. Sharks of the World will be out later this year, and just had another book I finished on Sharks and Rays of Europe. And I have another one coming out on sharks and the race of North America. So I'm busy writing books a lot of the times as well. So it's actually kind of after doing a lot of research papers, I kind of enjoy the books a lot more now. Kind of more fun, a little more creative. So I'll talk a little bit about tonight. So anyways, it's really cool to be able to come here and go talk to everybody. And I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about some of the sharks stuff I do, but talk about some of the different journeys and paths I've taken along this journey. And I want to introduce you to a few friends of mine. In the upper corner there is my friend Abdullah, and he's a young Zanzibaran fish observer, works for the Wildlife Conservation Society in Tanzania. I'll tell you a little bit about his story this night. This here is His Majesty the Emperor of Japan. This is Her Majesty Queen. And this is a lost shark. And tonight I'm going to explain how all of these, apparently just for the characters, are all actually related in my life. So stay tuned for that. So, but first off, I want to start off talking about something that everybody recognizes here. And this is a white shark. And this is the shark of book and movie fame, Jaws. And as many of you know, Jaws was obviously, well, some of you may not know if you're too young, but Jaws was a very popular movie, came out in the mid-70s, back when we were in high school back then. And the first time I went and saw it was over at the Steinbeck Theater on Cannery Row. And a lot of, at the time, I hear particularly a lot of it from younger people today. I'll see on social media, will talk about how white sharks are, how Jaws movie led to a lot of problems because people went out there and slaughtered sharks, and a lot of negative stories in terms of sharks resulting from the Jaws. Well, Jaws was like a monster movie. It was a fictional movie. And the thing is what actually really I tell people is that Jaws was actually a good thing for sharks. Because before the movie Jaws came out, sharks were like, if there's a shark attack around here, nobody really paid attention, like, oh, there was a shark attack. And that was kind of it. And nobody really paid that much attention to them. Well, after the movie came out, people started paying attention. And again, growing up in the area, people got all excited, like, oh wow, sharks around here. And then suddenly shark attacks became an event. But what really came out of that whole thing was people got interested and curious about sharks, to learn about them. And so I was really fortunate because the movie came out, I was in high school, and then in the late 70s I was in college. And when I started graduate school in the early 80s over here at Moss Landing Marine Laboratories, what I really was among the first sort of cohort of young researchers that taught the wave of people going like, hey, what's going on with these sharks out here? We don't know much about them. And so I was very fortunate that the timing worked out, that there was a lot of research interest, and Greg Kyle with Moss Landing Marine Laboratories was my advisor, started up a shark research program there at the time, and just around the world and around North America, there's a lot of interest. So it actually was a benefit that people suddenly were interested in, like, gosh, what's going on with these sharks out here? Well, the white shark gets a lot of notoriety. If you watch Shark Week or something, it's like 90% of the or 98% of the programs are on white sharks. And they a lot of times they like to show these white sharks breaching, coming out of the water, really spectacular and everything. Well, what was interesting is I did my PhD in South Africa in the mid-late 80s. And when I lived down there, it was kind of well known that these sharks would breach. You talk to the locals, they say, oh yeah, you can go out here to Seal Island and the sharks are breaching out there. And I was like, really? So obviously I'm sitting down to study sharks and work on my PhD, so I had to go out and see what was going on. And son of a gun, these sharks would come out of the water, and these sharks were breaching. But when you see it live, when you see it in person, it's a quick event. And you're like, wow, did I really see that? And so it was quite a spectacular thing to see these huge 15, 18, 20-foot sharks coming out of the water. And so I came back to California on one of my visits home, and I started telling people, like, my former advisor, Bob Lee at Fish and Game, and some of these other prominent people said, these white sharks, these big ones, they can breach out of the water. And they're like, yeah, okay, how many years do you have to see that? I said, no, seriously, these guys really did this. Well, I don't think they really believed me at the time, but about 2 years after I left South Africa, a fellow named Chris Fallows, actually using high-speed cameras, captured this on film and became world famous for doing that. And of course, I'm thinking like, damn, I could have done that. I think like, go get a camera. And so it was really kind of interesting to kind of see the whole evolution of that, because now everybody's all excited, oh, you got to go to South Africa to see breaching. And I said, well, actually, I don't think it really, it's just South Africa where that happens. It actually occurs in much wider places around the world, including right here in Monterey Bay and the Farallon Islands. And people started paying more attention to where they would see some of these events going on. And also I was fortunate at the time when I was in South Africa, and that they decided to put in a ban for shark fishing for white sharks, because at the time, people would kind of go out, there was a small group of guys who would go out seasonally between fishing seasons and catch these white sharks and then remove the jaws, and the jaws are what was really selling for them. But what kind of drove some of the stuff, and this is sort of a theme you see that occurs in a number of places, was that the fishing community, which has a lot of clout in South Africa, was like, hey, there's this whole industry of like cull seals down there. And even the seal population kept going up, they kept calling the seals. And that business there employed quite a few people. At that time, though, South Africa was coming to the end of the apartheid era, changed over a new government, and the last thing they needed was like, oh God, we got people like complaining about the seals we're killing down. So they decided to ban the harvesting of seals. Okay, well, besides putting about 100,000 people out of work, it also what it did was it created this issue where there was nobody fishing the seals, but there were these guys that were fishing the white sharks. And so what happened was the fishing community said like, hey, we need some out here that's going to prey on these seals. And so that's actually what led to South Africa being the first country in the world to ban seals. And so ban white shark fishing. And then subsequently after that, Australia picked that up, and in about 1994, California implemented that ban on white shark, taking white sharks, targeting them. In California, it's a little different story, because there's never really been a targeted fishery or anything like what occurred in South Africa. People would catch them once in a while, but they were not really, it wasn't really a main fishery. Well, here, what happened here, similar to South Africa, was in the 1970s, 1972, we had the Marine Mammal Protection Act came into play. And so that helped the recovery of a lot of the marine mammals, including seals. And if you're in the Monterey area, you don't have to go far to go down the wharf, go down to the harbor, go over to Moss Landing. There's seals up the wazoo. There's so many of them around there. And this was all a benefit from the Marine Mammal Protection Act. Well, what's happened since then with that is that, well, you got all these food items going up here, so, well, naturally, you've got all the predators increasing. And so what I've noticed, especially in the last several years, is that I can go up like in a helicopter and do some observations in the bay, and we'll go out around the cement boat, and I'll literally get tired of counting white sharks. I'll get over to 30 or 40 of them, and I just stop counting. There's so many of them out there in the bay now. Now, whether there were these numbers 30, 40 years ago, it's hard to say. I know I was a very active diver back then. I used to do a lot of spearfishing, go out here to get halibut and stuff, and I can tell you, ignorance is bliss. I'd rather not know about it, think about it. And I was a young person, didn't really realize at the time just how powerful these sharks could be, white sharks. But what's really fascinating in the story today with these white sharks is what you see are these small ones. Now, if you've spent any time or grew up in the area, you know seasonally, usually this time of year, you tend to get the large white sharks that show up. But what's interesting is now we're getting these small ones. When I say small, I say like 6 foot, 6, 7 foot sharks. That's how big when they're born. And so, like, in my attitude, if it's as big as me, I'm out of the water. I'm not standing there. I don't care if it's a white shark or whatever else. But to me, I was pointing out, this is a benefit that really, to me, speaks well to the health of the bay, that you have this population of white sharks that traditionally, we knew they would pop up, and the nursery areas were down in Southern California, kind of Santa Barbara, Ventura area. But now they seem to have expanded out to up the California coast now to Monterey Bay. So again, I try to emphasize, a lot of this came about because of this movie Jaws. And what I try to tell people is like, here's a good success story of something. Marine mammal populations have recovered. We've had white shark populations recover. It's a good thing. So, people should in California, like, hey, here's something we did right. Let's pat ourselves on the back for a change instead of sounding like all doom and gloom about stuff. So, that's as much as I really want to talk about white sharks tonight, but I just had to set the context for these things as far as this whole area of shark research. Now, another shark, oftentimes you'll hear about, in addition to white sharks, is the tiger shark. And again, these sharks, kind of the ones that these couple of them I'm highlighting, are kind of get highlighted because they tend to occasionally bite people and usually cause a big sensation. Now, most sharks are specialized predators, but like with this one exception, the tiger shark, which kind of is a big dopey shark, but they do get quite large. But these things are kind of like a garbage can with fins. And if there's one thing that the movie Jaws had right, if you remember, when they opened up the tiger shark, you pull out a license plate, boots, rain jacket, and that kind of characterizes these things. They're literally like a garbage can with fins. They'll eat just about anything they run into. Another species that gets a lot of notoriety is the oceanic whitetip. And again, partly because it's also one of the 4 most dangerous sharks in the world. But it tends to be offshore in more of a pelagic realm. Further off, people have maybe been involved in accidents at sea, ships going down or something. And during World War II, we had a lot of Navy people commenting on shark attacks. This was probably most likely the culprit. In fact, there was a very well-known instance off of Durban, South Africa, where a boat went down during World War II, torpedoed, and a lot of people were attacked by these oceanic whitetips. Interesting story with one of these things. When I was in South Africa, we were up on the South Africa-Mozambique border doing some deep set long lines, putting down lines down like 3,000 feet, trying to see what kind of deep sea sharks occur there. Well, you're kind of in the tropics. It's the middle of the day. It's hot as heck out. So what do you do while you're waiting for the line to set? Well, you jump in the water. It's like crystal blue water here. You're offshore. And so we kind of put on our face masks and we go splashing around for an hour or two. And we get out of the water after doing this, and we barely got out of the water, and we're just getting ready to start to pull the long line, and one of my friends goes, hey, take a look at this. And we look over the back of the boat, and there's like 12, 15 white sharks, oceanic whitetips, swimming around into the boat. And we'd just been in the water for like 90 minutes with face masks and didn't see a thing. And believe me, the water was clear out there. Those things didn't just come in from like Cucamonga or someplace, 100 miles away. These things were clearly in the area, but they knew how to stay just out of our vision, because literally as soon as we got out of the water, these things came right in the boat. And a lot of times sharks can be habituated by knowing what occurs around the boat, by coming into boats because they know the boat associated with food. So because of that, I kind of avoided swimming in the open ocean now, so that's why you have graduate students. Because they don't know any better, they all haven't had that experience like I did. And I was a grad student, and in fact, at the time, all of us were in the water, we're all like studying sharks and everything. I could have put a real impact on the shark research group in South Africa at the time. But while these other sharks get a lot of notoriety and a lot of attention, these are more the ones that I enjoy studying. And again, the one here, the largest one, the whale shark here, which actually is bigger than a bus. These things can get up to about 60 feet in length. They tend to be very checkerboard there, and people do go dive in parts of the world to see these things. But they're filter feeders, they generally don't bite people, they're kind of docile. People sometimes get a little crazy and they go out and they try to hold on to the fins and interfere with nature in my mind a little bit, but they're cool to see, just kind of like little odd things, stand back and watch. But a lot of the species that people don't think about, and this constitutes over 80% of the sharks you'll encounter, are these little things, like the spine pygmy shark. This is about as big as this shark gets, and it's fully grown. You get things like the cookie cutter shark, which gets about so big. And the interesting thing with something like this is this shark actually has the largest teeth relative to the size of the shark. And so and people think like, well, the white shark's got big teeth. Well, yeah, they got big teeth, but relative to the size of the body, they're not that big. These actually have quite large teeth. And the reason they have is they're sort of semi-parasitic in that they'll come up to like dolphins or whales, other sharks and fish and tunas, and they have like these big suction lips here, they'll like grab onto things and take a bite out of these things. So a lot of times you see tunas have these big scoop bites at them, and they're done by these things here. Now, think of sharks. They tend to think of things that are kind of gray or brown or sort of kind of just a uniform color. They never think about a shark like a goblin shark that's pink with blue fins. Like, how many people ever heard of a shark with pink with blue fins before now? Well, that's what these things are like when they actually come up. And this goblin shark here, this was part of a Shark Week show I did a couple years ago, where we went out and to Japan, and they wanted us. There was this alien shark series they did. We were on. My student and I were on most of the episodes over the 5 seasons it ran. And every year it'd be like, well, let's see what shark these guys can go out and find now. We did a megamouth one year, and then they came back and said, well, what else can you find? Well, let's go try and get a goblin shark. I mean, it's great to tell you a little behind the scenes thing. We went out to get these goblin sharks. I had an idea we could go get them. We went out, and like the first set, got one right away, right off the bat. But if you watch the show, it's like the end of the show, the last set, the last minute, the last chance they have to get one. Was in reality, we got it right off the bat. So we actually got a couple of them, so it's kind of cool. But it's sort of when I watch those shows now, I generally don't watch them, but if I do, I always know, like, they probably got this thing right away, and then they just ended up having to build a TV show around it. But this is one of the cooler sharks that you ever come across people talking about.
Is that alive? Is he alive?
Yeah, oh yeah, it's alive. We took the shark, we had a big, this is the wonder of doing stuff with TV shows, because if you apply for a research grant, they would think you're out of your freaking mind. But you go to the TV show and you're like, hey, why don't we get a goblin shark? Okay, so they get a big tank, we fill it with water, we catch it, we put it in the tank, it swims around, and these guys are just filming this. And we got some amazing footage on the sharks with these things. This thing's almost like the alien from Alien, where its jaws can shoot out to grab its prey. And it has the fastest jaw reaction of any known shark that they've studied, faster than white sharks. It's just bang. It's really quick. And we only found that out because we caught this one, and one of my Japanese colleagues was able to, because of the use of the high-speed film, was able to time how fast this thing was. And so he's actually working on a paper on this thing. It was just amazing how quick these things are to catch stuff. And even sharks like this that appear to be kind of sluggish, and they are compared to a white shark, these things are actually pretty quick. And so it's kind of cool. We actually were able to have this big tank and put these sharks in there and fill it up with water, and they got just some amazing footage. Again, you could never do this if I went through the normal channel, they just like...
And then do you put them back?
Yeah, what we do is we tag it and then we let it go. We tracked a couple with satellite tags for a few days. So we got some of the first tags on one of these things here. We also did on the megamouth shark a couple years earlier off Taiwan. We went out and we were the first ones to ever tag one of those. It was pretty cool going out there to get some of these things. Get one of these goblin sharks. Now this is another one, another shark here. This actually does occur in Monterey Bay. This is a 6-gill shark. And it's in a group of sharks that have 6 or 7 paired gills. Why is this important? No, it's important because all other sharks have 5 gills. None have less than 4, but except there's about 6 or 7 species that have 6 or 7. There's 2 that have 7 gills, and there's about 5 that have 6 gills. And so whenever you want to screw with your artist friends who are doing like paintings and stuff. I've had some friends that like do these really nice illustrations. I have a cousin that actually did a really cool shark one time, and she goes, "What do you think about this?" And I go, "Well, how come it only has 4 gills?" So they only have 4, although they have 4 gills, no, they have 5. And most of the time, artists will put 3 or 4 gills for some reason because it works out artistically better. Don't ask me, I can only do stick drawings the best. So, but this shark here actually has kind of a lot of just sort of a bit of sentimental attachment, because this was one of the 2 species, including the 7-gill shark, that I started off studying when I was at MIIS Landing. And when I went to the lab there back in the 80s to start my master's, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and I wanted to do something different, work on something that was very different. And so what I did was, I went up to the California Academy of Sciences at the time, and this is all kind of pre-modern day aquarium, and went up and introduced myself to the director of the Steiner Aquarium, John McCosker. And I asked him I said, I'm looking around for something to do, and I got, this is where you really find out what people are like. And John McCosker was a very prominent name in the field at the time, but the fact that he took time for someone like me to talk with me was amazing. Because a lot of times people at that stage don't even want to give grad students a time a day. And so I had a nice interaction discussion with him. I said, I'm looking to do some sharks. I just don't know what to do, because I'm really, looking around. He says, well, we've got these 6 and 7 gills that occur here in San Francisco Bay. And I was like, great, this is going to be cool. I'm going to go work on these things. So I went back down to MIIS Landing. The next day I went to my advisor, Greg Kai's office, and I was super excited. I said, Greg, I'm going to work on a life history study on 6 and 7 gill sharks. And he sits back in his office, and Greg goes, oh, you mean Notorhynchus and Hexanchus? And I was like, what's that? And he's like, okay, listen, don't ever come into my office if you don't know the scientific name and if you're not prepared. Because if you're not prepared, you're wasting your time and you're wasting my time, so get out of my office. And so I was like, okay, I gotta get out of here. So, but while it seems harsh, it was a valuable lesson to learn, because why go see your advisor? Why come and see me or go see Jason or someone else if you're not prepared? And so it was a valuable life lesson I learned from that experience. It seemed like a minor thing, because it kind of deflated me, to be honest with you. But when I thought about it, it was like, well, yeah, why am I wasting because the way he phrased it, like, why am I wasting my time and his? I wasn't prepared. I didn't even know the scientific name of it. So, it's kind of emphasized to a lot of your grad students here is that, when you go in to if you're going to go do something, be prepared, because you're not just wasting that person's time, you're wasting your time. You want to make the time you have with an advisor or an employer or whoever it is, make it count. So you want to learn, you want to know how, you want to be prepared. And so it's, again, one of these things I learned along the way, and I'll share a few more stories of like just life lessons you learn from people along the way. Now, a lot of these sharks, I mentioned, like over 80% of these sharks are less than like 6 feet long. In fact, most of them, over half of them, don't even get to 3 feet. But again, it comes back to a lot of these ones are very colorful, like these little shy sharks in South Africa. There's an endemic group of sharks. There's only about half a dozen species. And these things here, the scientific name, they're called shy sharks because if you see them diving quite a bit, if you go up and you touch them or shake them or something, they'll curl up in a ball and put their fin over their eyes, and they're shy. So the scientific name for this thing is Haplobluphus edwardsi. So we used to call them happy eddies, because they're kind of cute to see them in the kelp forest diving there. So, but if you go up there and you harass them, they curl up in a ball and put their fins over their eyes. They're not such a happy eddy. So you kind of don't want to make them upset too much. So, but there's a kind of one of these little sharks that they're actually very common there, but just people know almost nothing about them. And they're only found in a certain stretch of coastline in South Africa. And it's just one example of some of the other sharks. You get into things like flat sharks. And flat sharks are rays. And if you take a shark and you squash the shark down, it's basically, that's a ray. It's just very, and what's interesting is if you tell people like, oh, I'm going to go look at some rays, or I'm going to go look at a skate, oh God, if you tell them a skate, like here, they just like, their eyes just glaze over. But if you say flat shark, from a branding standpoint, so students are maybe guys in marketing or branding, I'll tell you, I get the phone starts ringing on this one, like, flat shark, what's a flat shark? Oh, well, let me tell you. This particular species here is a deep sea one that actually does occur here in Monterey Bay. And what's interesting is people tend to think like with rays, a lot of these, in skates, they all tend to have these soft bottoms. And a lot of them do, but the skates are one of the two largest groups of cartilaginous fish in the world. And I say cartilaginous because the sharks and the rays and the next group I'm going to talk about are all united because they have a cartilaginous skeleton. That's compared to, say, like your most of your rockfish, your salmon, your halibut, the things you tend to think of. Those are all bony fish. They have calcified skeletons. What was really interesting with this thing, to give you a sense of learning about these, some guys in the Galapagos were doing some deep set. We're actually studying the volcanic, we're looking at hydrothermal vents. They're actually geologists. And I got to tell you, I've learned a lot from the geologists because they find things no one would be thinking to look over the rocks for all these types of things. They'd be looking on the sand of the mud. And there's this whole fauna of these things that actually live on these rocks. Well, this particular skate lays its egg case adjacent to hydrothermal vents of like 2,000 meters deep. And it's one of only there's a bird in the southern South Pacific that does this, and there's some extinct dinosaurs that did this. And the only vertebrates they know of where they take advantage of active hydrothermal vents and put their egg cases there to basically warm them up, to increase the incubation time so they'll hatch out. Because when these things are in their egg case are more vulnerable to predation. And you're down at 2,000 meters, 6,000 feet or more. It's cold down there. It's dark. And so this ended up being a paper we did in Science last year, which was pretty cool. Just that, in fact, I got involved. These geologists were seeing these skates down there, didn't know what they were seeing, so they contacted me. And it turned out to be quite a nice international study looking at these things. But it just I use that as an example. Just there's a lot more complexity going on with these things than people often realize. Now I've talked about the flat sharks, and talk about the ghost sharks. Now you think flat sharks people don't want to hear about. Ghost sharks are another one. These things, and I can say this from experience, because my lab actually, there's a kind of an archaic group of lineage of cartilaginous fish been around for about 400 million years. They're still hanging in there. Not a lot. There's about 50. There's a little between 50 and 60 species. And my lab over at Moss Landing is like the leading institution for discovering and naming these ghost sharks. We've named over almost 25% of all the known species we've done here. And actually, one of the ones we described and discovered occurs right here in Monterey Bay. Now, this is California. We're right here, Silicon Valley, high tech, everything. Who thinks you're going to find a new shark out here in the bay? We did. And in fact, it's one of two of these ghost sharks. And what was really interesting with these ghost sharks is that the common name you hear a lot of times would be called chimeras or ratfish. Now again, if I say chimera or ratfish, it's just like I'm like the main tag repairman. It's just the phone never rings, nothing at all. But if you say ghost sharks, which in some parts of the world these are referred to as ghost sharks, man, I have the phone ringing off the hook like, you got a ghost shark in Monterey Bay? What's that all about? And suddenly it gets quite a bit of interest. Well, interestingly, when we first publicized this ghost shark we discovered here about 10 years ago now, not long after that they had one of these sci-fi channel movies came out titled Ghost Shark. Of course, the ghost shark doesn't look anything like these. They have, of course, it looks more like sort of resembles a white shark with big teeth. I'm still kind of hoping to get some royalties from this thing for the name concept. I'm probably not going to lose sleep on that one. That's probably not going to happen. So that gives you a little idea of some of the little ideas and some of the different diversity as far as the flat sharks and the ghost sharks. But a question I get a lot of times is people will ask me like, well, has everything been discovered out there when it comes to this? And I show this figure here and say, well, no, actually things haven't been. He said you have when you look over the last, going back to 1758, which is when sort of the formal nomenclature for MIIS was formulated, you can see that, sort of between 1758 and 1899, you had, about 420 species. On average, that was about 3 species a year named. In the first part of the first 80 years of the 20th century, you had on average about 5 species named. Well, in the past 40 years, you're averaging about 11 to 12 species a year, and that's about where we are now. We've seen, especially over the last 15 years, there's just been this renaissance and going out and trying to discover and name things and get things out there. And it's really, sadly, it's only a small group of us that are doing this here, and there's so much out there that can be done. Like I'll ask groups like this oftentimes, like, does anybody, just in terms of species globally, and this is everything, not just sharks and rays, but how many species a year are named? Anybody have a guess? How many new species are discovered and named?
60.
How many?
60? 60?
It's a little low.
1,000.
How many?
1,000?
Still a little low.
Couple 100,000.
It's on average, there's 18,000 new species named a year.
Oh my God.
So I tell us, because, yeah, to get that reaction, people are like, wow, I didn't realize there was so much out there to be discovered. You always hear these figures about, like, things are going extinct, we've only discovered 10% of species out there, and that's why I try to tell you, hey, there's a lot out there. You just need to know where to look for it and stuff. So it's kind of it's something that I try to emphasize to people, like, especially young people, like, hey, there's a lot we can learn out here. Now, so what's it like going out and, like, looking for new sharks? Well, it's kind of like a CSI investigation. And like, I've never actually seen any of these shows here, I've done a whole bunch of them and stuff, but I like this one because it has Ted Danson and those of us that were kind of in our heyday back in the 80s, we had dark hair, all kind of thin, like Ted was when he was doing Cheers. His hair is gray, my hair is gray, I'm just happy to have hair. So Ted and I go back a little ways on this. But what's kind of neat about this is that when you're looking and finding new species, it's kind of like a CSI investigation, where you really, going out and finding it's just really part of it, because a lot of times you don't really know when you're in the field if it's a new species or not. Sometimes, once in a while, you have that eureka moment, like, yeah, that one's definitely different. But most of the time, it's like, yeah, it might be different or not. So you have to come bring it back to a laboratory, museum, and start to do some research on it to determine, like, why is it different? And then so it's literally you're going through this whole investigative process, and it gets kind of cool. To me, it makes things kind of fun to be able to determine, like, why is this different? And you have to write up a form. There's a whole bunch of processes you have to do, because people say, like, God, if they're naming all these species, how come it takes you so long to name some? In fact, the paper was just published last week, I think. You know, it tells on average it takes something like 11 years to name a new species, and I was kind of like, 11 years, that's nothing. I've got species, you know, I've found in museums that are like 50 years old that still haven't been named formally. So there's a whole process to it, and it's not an area of field that's like actually well supported. So a lot of it's people who do this as sort of as a passion for doing this process. So it's kind of cool to do, but it's like, so why do you do this then? Like, there's really not like a ton of interest in it, even though people are always get excited when you just mention you name a new species. Well, the reason is, and what's really gets me going on these lost sharks, is that you think of things like this, these sort of terrestrial animals here, though an argument can make polar bears more of a marine animal. You know, if things like elephants or lions or gorillas or polar bears disappear, people are going to be outraged about it. They'll be upset about it. You know, and so that's something. So people get upset about it. But if I show somebody something like this, a honeycomb cat shark. This species hasn't been seen since 1972. And yet we know this thing used to be quite commonly caught in a lot of trawl fisheries back in the 50s and 60s. This is off South Africa and southern Mozambique. This thing wasn't even officially named until 2006, 34 years after it disappeared. So you got something like this that actually has disappeared, and yet we haven't seen that. We don't know, there may be around, because a lot of these areas where they occur is kind of remote, so there may be a few around still, but they certainly are not being caught like they used to. You have other things like this speckled cat shark. This one was named in 1972, but we haven't seen this thing, again, these off East Africa, we haven't seen this thing since 1991. Again, maybe around, because East Africa is not the easiest environment to go study things in. And another one, Pondicherry shark. This was a shark that was discovered in 1839. We haven't seen this since the 70s. And so a lot of these things, when I look at these things, these are kind of like, in a lot of cases, the proverbial canary in the coal mine. Because why people are paying attention to these top predators like the white sharks, all these things that are just below it, these lower level predators, are being completely overlooked. And in some cases, these things may be disappearing. And what's happening at that level is going to be more informative of what may happen down the road. Because by the time some of these top predators start having problems, well, there's been a whole probably chain of things that have got, chain of events that have gone on below. So that's why it's important to know what's going on with some of these species that below these just sort of the white sharks. Because the white shark's just one species. I haven't asked anybody yet. Does anybody know how many species of sharks there are in the world? I think I had it in my abstract for this program. I guess nobody bothered to read it. It's okay.
1,200?
What?
1,200?
It's 1,255.
You had it!
Gold star. Well, I think I said 1,200 in the abstract. It's about 12. I checked today. I say that because I got to see if my Australian colleagues have named anybody new today. I've gone up there a few times and been giving a talk, and I found oh, they named another one. Damn it. That includes the flat sharks and the ghost sharks. Of just the true sharks, there's 540 species, which you think of as a shark. And that number's been going because literally about a quarter of all sharks, just regular, traditional, which you think of a normal shark, as well as sharks raised and the ghost sharks, about 25% have just been named and discovered in the last 15 years. So there's a lot of, there's so much out there, and we've been undergoing this sort of renaissance right now, trying to get out and name a lot of these things. As they say, we're still finding these things off California, of all places. When you go to some place like Africa or Asia, it gets really, really interesting. So it's kind of cool to go out and find this stuff, and people, again, another question I frequently get from people is well, where do you go find these lost sharks? Well, you can find it the National State of Perry, the Super Bowl. And by the way, you have 5 gills, so it wasn't a legitimate shark. And I believe all my shark buddies and I were all counting 5 gills a gill. Sometimes they just show up in the post office, and I literally have had these things. I've had sharks show up sometimes literally in the mail to me. When you're researching and describing a new species of shark, you need to borrow things on loan for comparison, known species. And so one of my former students and I, Jenny Kemper, we requested to borrow this specimen just for comparison on this new species. And so it comes in the mail one day, and we open up the package and oh, that's interesting. That's a new species of ghost shark. So we got a twofer on that one. And that's happened to me several times where we're actually able to borrow something and realize that, we found yet another new species, quite incidentally. Sometimes you go on doing TV shows and you'll be discovering new sharks, like this little lantern shark we got in Japan. And this was kind of interesting. We talked earlier about the goblin shark, and we were asking about we put this thing in a tank and everything. Well, it was interesting because my Japanese colleague and I were this thing here, this is about as big as this thing gets, and this my student Vicky's holding this little shark here. And this turns out this is actually a new species of shark we got. And not only do we get that, we got 20-something different, 25 different species of sharks, and a couple of them, we got the salamander cat shark. And we were able to put in the tank and see swim around. And there's been less than 10 of these ever caught in the world. And here we got one on the show, so we're 2 little kids this is really cool. And the discovery guy was well, we got a goblin shark over here. Yeah, we know what those are, but these are really cool. So they started getting a little more interested, okay, well, let's go take a look at these things a little closer if Dave's excited about it, because we're here for goblin sharks, and he's looking at these little lantern sharks here. But it's again, I mentioned this was in Tokyo Bay, Tokyo Bay is one of the most high traffic areas in the world as far as tankers and freight goes through the port there. So we're not in an area that's kind of remote. We're in a fairly well-known area, and we're still finding new species of sharks. But the best place to go find them, now you tend to think you want to go out on a boat. It's yeah, it's great to be out on a boat, blazing across the ocean. But you're one person on a boat fishing. And whether you're using a drop line, a gill net, a trawl net, you're fishing. And so you're hoping you might get something interesting. Well, what I like to do is I like to go to these villages all over the world, most of them places you haven't heard of, and I got like 100 plus boats out there working for me every day. Okay, they don't look at it that way; they're actually working themselves. But I kind of like to get in and know these guys here, and so they go out every day, and I just wait for them to come in. And it's the most amazing thing watching these guys come in at these different fish markets, because they come in. Because they come in there and they're immediately, and everything's quick. There's like an auction. They come in, they offload, they set up here. This is in Zanzibar, and they just got, and they're just got everything going on here as far as the fish. So you have to move quick and be walking around. You have to have some idea what you're looking for, and you develop an eye for it after a while. What you're looking for. You're not never quite sure, but you want, if you see a shark, you see like a ray or something, you're going to want to go check it out. And plus, it's kind of fascinating, because I walk through these places, and I have, and oftentimes if they don't speak English, it's not well spoken there, I'll have an interpreter to local. I usually try to hook up with some of the local fisheries guys or observers to go through here, because if you walk through and you're a stranger, you won't get anywhere with them. I can speak from experience, having gone all over a lot of different places, but if you go with somebody they recognize, your chance of finding stuff get a lot better. I had first time I went to Taiwan in 1988, I kept going to this one fish market every day, and these guys kind of, I think, found me a bit of an amusement. There's this guy wandering around here in this village here. I used to have little kids follow me around. I couldn't figure out what they were following around looking for. And finally one of the guys there told me, well, I've never seen anybody with blue eyes before. And so it's kind of interesting. You got these kids just be following you around. And so, and then my Taiwanese colleague I was with, I was trying to learn a little bit of Mandarin just to be able to kind of converse with them and stuff. And so I was like, ni hao or something. Right? And they kind of started chuckling the one day there. And my Taiwanese colleague goes, oh, that's kind of cute, Dave. But he goes, these guys actually speak Taiwanese, not Mandarin. Okay, so I'll just let you talk beyond this thing here. But what happened out of that is we ended up going out and having like a kind of a traditional village dinner that night. And after that, I was like golden with these guys. I still go there now. This was 31 years ago. I go there now every few years, maybe it might be 10 years or more. And these guys will still see me coming down there, the fishermen there. And the ones that were still, they still recognize me. It's kind of touching to think about. You go on back there, people you see every maybe 10 years, and they recognize you. Hey, there's Dave. What's going on down? It's kind of experience that I can't express how cool that is to be able to go back to some places that I visited years ago, and I've gone back periodically. And as you go around a lot of times, you see this is kind of what you're looking for. Guys are like pulling something like this eagle ray here, and I got to run up to see what it is. And of course, this thing's kind of big, and there's guys usually standing around, and they're auctioning it off like that. And these big ones are hard because a lot of times, if you see something that's really cool, it's really hard to get those, because those are like worth a lot of money to them. I usually look for the smaller trash fish pile, because that's where usually the cool stuff in my mind is going to be. You come across a lot of times guys like this, like here's this like really cool stingray that might be a new species, but there's not really much left of it right now. And I've had that happen sometimes. I was in China as we went going to a fish market. I saw this like deep water shark, and I was like, I walked over, and this little Chinese lady was sitting there, like kind of doing her bartering stuff, and I kind of started pointing. I wanted to buy this little shark, which I thought was a new species, and she was all excited. So before I could say anything, she just had the shark there. She just whipped out this magenta. There you go. She thought I wanted to buy it to eat. I was like, so I was like, okay. So I gave her some money, and I had a little shark piece, and I walked down and gave it to some kids that were home. But that's just kind of some of the things you have happen. Like here's a whole new species of shark, and it's one of those ones I recognize. Like, oh, this is something really cool. And within I can't even tell you, just boom. It was just like she just whipped out this thing, and just bang, 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 bang. Had it in a bag, here you go, be $100 Taiwanese dollars or whatever, and it's like, oh, okay, thanks. But it's cool. It's just those are the kinds of things I really enjoy wandering through these fish markets and kind of getting to know some people and talking with them. And as I've said, I like to talk about these fishermen. Like this was last year in Sri Lanka. I went to this deep water port. And this is to tell you how things have changed over, for me at least in my career. The younger people, you guys are sort of used to having your phones and everything here. Well, years ago I'd have to try and explain something, sort of draw it out like, yeah, the shark looks like this, and Because I said, I can't draw to save my life, so I'm trying to explain something to him. Well, a colleague of mine had sent me a picture of this really interesting shark from Sri Lanka, from this particular port. This was before I knew I was going there. It was about a year before, about 10 months or so. And so when I went to Sri Lanka last year, I was like, okay, I want to go check out this port here, so, to talk to these guys. So we went there, and I was thinking on the ball for a change. I don't always do that, but so I had a picture of this shark that I was looking for based on this one that this friend of mine took. And so I was talking to these guys, and I'm showing them a picture. Hey, here's, have you guys ever seen these? I'm kind of looking at it like this, going, okay, come back tomorrow. Okay, I'll come back tomorrow. So I come back tomorrow, and they had one. A whole new species of shark, actually a new genus they brought in. And I was like, and from showing a picture, I'm like, wow, I was doing cartwheels, literally, I didn't hurt myself, which, this thing I'm kind of happy I didn't get hurt. But I was so excited about it, and that's the kind of thing that keeps me going. It's like Christmas every day I go there. And so I asked these guys, I said, did you guys catch these very often? They said, oh yeah, we caught 3 yesterday. I says, you did? So yeah, we just throw them back, they're not worth anything, so we don't keep them. And so I was like, okay, so this is my world. This is really cool to see. It's like going in there and talking to these guys, and here's a whole new group of shark. And interestingly, at this village we were at, there's this whole fishery for what they're catching out here, these deep water sharks. They get the oil from the squalene that they use. And there's a fishery, they collect the squalene, it goes to some Japanese buyers, and unless you're right there at the right moment, when these boats come in, they offload, they clean the sharks, they throw the carcass away, they take them up in these huts, they open up, and then once all the steps there, they close up for basically curing out all the liver oil. But if you walk there at the wrong moment, it just looks like an empty beach with boats on it. But if you're there at the right moment, so here's an entire fishery going on that the Sri Lankan government and the fishery, nobody had a clue this was going on. There's nothing wrong with it. It was completely legal. They weren't hiding anything, it was just like, they would just open up shop and the boats would come in, buy the sharks, get the liver, and that's why they weren't keeping the one that I was looking for, because it doesn't have a very oily liver. And the oily liver has to do with buoyancy in a lot of these deep sea sharks. So it was just kind of, again, sort of one of these weird, wonderful things that just keeps me excited and going all this time here, and just sort of meeting these people. And here's this whole fishery that these guys had no idea was even going on. These guys did, because they were getting some money from fishing there. And this is the little shark I got here. So it wasn't a big one, but that's about as big as they get. This was actually a pregnant female. And what's interesting about this one here is that it has what's called ovophagy. In other words, the reproductive mode is the first embryo into the uterus feeds on all of his siblings when they come down the uterus. And that's these little sharks here. And that was this thing didn't even, when I had this thing here, this thing didn't even have a name to it. Now it's been officially named now. But yet I found this weird shark these guys catch deep water. It has they feed on their young in the uterus. And so they basically have one young, or 2 young at a time, because they have 2 embryos. So, but it's just really cool story that I like to piece together when I see some of these things. And these are some of just to kind of give you a sort of an idea of some of the different sharks and skates and ghost sharks I've named over the years. And I always got to point out, this one here, this guitar fish here, I was off from South Africa, the one I named last year after my nephew. It's called Austin's Ghost Sharks. It's kind of cool. I mean, you kind of name a star, but if you name like a guitar or a saw shark or a shark after something, it's kind of cool. Another one that's really cool is this one here. It's this saw shark I got from the Philippines. And I named this one after my niece Lana. It's called Lana's Saw Sharks. I got Lana's Saw Shark, Austin's guitar fish, and my niece is a nurse, so this is actually my retirement planning. So I got my niece is a nurse, so she'll remember old Uncle Dave when I'm kind of decrepit and stuff. I don't want to get that phone call like, who are you? Uncle who? Remember the shark? And so I kind of tell them, that's my niece there. I just give her, she just finished her master's in nursing and stuff, and so clearly kind of excited. I was kind of cool to have a saw shark named after her. So the question I get a lot of times is like, how did I do this? As far as being able to go out, how did I do this to come out and go around? Well, when I was about 5 years old, my parents gave me a book on sharks. And this is a story I hear oftentimes people in my profession will say, like, yeah, I got this book on sharks and I thought they were the coolest things. And usually when you're a young kid, 5 years old, dinosaurs, sharks, whales are kind of cool. But I was just mesmerized by these things. I thought they were just the coolest thing I'd ever seen. Well, then when I was about 10 years old, I was thinking like, I really still like these things. And like, I wanted to figure out some way to travel the world, look for sharks, and figure if I can get paid for it somehow. I was 10 years old. I had no idea I was going to go from here to here. I remember my parents were like, okay, this guy's he's going to go out. He's 10 years old. There's no way he's going to do this. I was going to Castroville Elementary School. I'm from Prunedale. People from Prunedale just don't go off and like travel. So I think I started getting more worried when I was in high school. I'm still talking about going to sharks, and they're going to, what's this guy going to do when he finishes high school? He's going to get out of here. But it was just, the point was, it gave me a focus really in life that I had something to aim for, to drive for. And so at each stage, whether it was going in high school, I went to Hartnell College, I went to Humboldt State, each stage, it gave me something to go for. And even when I was finishing up like my bachelor's degree, like no one in my family ever been to college, or except my dad had a bachelor's degree at grad school, like I heard of. So like, why do you need a graduate degree? You don't need a graduate degree. I'm going to go study sharks. Well, the professors took me aside, and a lot of times you'll find in life, you'll find mentors, they're not always professors, but sometimes just different people you meet along the way. And this one guy took me aside when I was at Humboldt and said, listen, man, you really need to if you want to pursue this, kind of going on and on about traveling the world and study sharks, okay, well, let's have a reality check. If you want to do this, this is what you need to do. You need to go to grad school to get a degree. If you want to be taken seriously, you need to at least get a master's degree at the time. So I was like, okay, I had no reference point at that time to deal with. So I came down and I talked to Greg Kane at Moss Landing, who's been a huge influence throughout my career. And he was a guy I told you earlier threw me out of his office after I was in grad school. Well, I came down and interviewed with him, and as I was kind of finishing up the interview, I kind of said and this was all last minute, I kind of said Greg, I'm a little worried that my grades weren't great. I was kind of a BC student. I wasn't like one of these. I couldn't get into my program now with the students I take. You have to get like 3.99 something rather than all these honors and stuff. And I'm like, that wasn't me. So I kind of said to Greg, do you think I have a chance? And Greg sits back and he goes, what you ought to do in his office before he tossed me out. He says, getting in is not going to be your problem, Dave. Getting out is going to be your problem. But because I had this drive, it was like, okay, he gave me a chance. He's going to let me in the door. I'm not going to let myself down. I'm not going to let him down. I'm going to get through this thing one way or another. And I did. And along the way, again, some of these people you meet, I met this guy named Leonard Capagno, who at the time was probably one of the foremost, certainly one of the top 5 shark researchers in the world. And he was up at the Tiburon Center, the Romberg Center, at the time, and he was working on the original sharks of the world at the Food and Agriculture Organization, published in 1984. And I got to know him when I was doing my master's. And right when I was finishing up, he was going off to South Africa, and I kind of made some comment to him like, hey, if you need anybody to carry your bags, let me know. Now, a PhD wasn't even on my radar. That's not, I'm having a master's. But I made this comment to him, an off-the-cuff comment, and 8 months later, he called me from South Africa, and he said, hey, I have a PhD position here. It's funded for the next few years. Do you want it? Of course. I was like a nanosecond, because all of a sudden, after years of aiming for this, suddenly what I'd wanted to do since I was like 5 years old was going to happen. I'm going to get to travel the world and go study sharks. And South Africa was a cool place to go do this thing. And so, within a nanosecond, I was like, okay, I know where I'm going. One thing I learned along the way with a lot of the people here, with a lot of people I met along the way, and probably many of you have as well, is that, you have to work at things. It doesn't come, you have to be willing to, not fear failure. You have people like, Michael Jordan getting cut from his high school basketball team. He had a pretty decent career in basketball. I read an article by J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series, and commented that being rejected so many times by publishing groups inspired her because she felt liberated. That she can go do what she wants now, do what she wants to, not what somebody else is telling her. to do. And so what I found is that people that tend to be successful have always had their failures. I found a really cool quote here by Seth Godin on, if failure is not an option, neither is success. And if you ever talk to people that are successful, and I certainly have, I'm sure most of you have, what they'll start off with is they'll start telling you about all their failures. Oh, I made this mistake here, I did that, I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have. And you're going like, yeah, but how are you successful? Well, if you listen, they're telling you why they're successful. It was through their failures they learned how to succeed and be successful. And so I had a good friend of mine I grew up with. I can still remember in the mid-70s, we were playing catch down the street, because back then we didn't have phones, we stood in the street and played catch with football or baseball. And he came down, he said, God, I can't believe my dad is he invested in some company that does overnight mail or something. What's wrong with the post office? And I'm like, I don't know what's wrong. The post office seems fine to me. Well, it was a company called Federal Express. He got in on before they went public. Because his dad was a Navy fighter pilot, and Fred Smith was a former Navy fighter pilot. Not that I don't know if they knew each other personally, but the point is he was very successful at that. Well, then a few years later, we're still down the street playing catch down there, and he's going like, yeah, I can't believe my dad's sold all this FedEx stuff, and he bought this other company called because I'm not sure, it's they do portable disk drives. They're called Seagate Technologies or something. And those are if you invest in those things early on, they were pretty good. But years later, I was still a young person at the time. When I got older, I asked his dad about these investments, and all he went on about, I screwed up with this one, I made a bad investment there, I did this wrong. But he read a lot, and he learned from his mistakes. And of course, he had some other ones he did pretty well in. But the point was a lot of these people, successful people you find, is that they had their failures, they've had setbacks, but just having a positive attitude, having a drive to stay on it, stay focused on it, be passionate about it, and be persistent. And it's amazing where you can go. I went from Prunedale, for crying out loud. When I was growing up, I can tell you, we're standing around playing catch all the time. It's maybe we'll go to Hornell, maybe I'll put a little ball and pump some gas, and I'll figure out what I'm going to do later on. Whereas getting a focus early on in life helped me a lot. I think for a lot of people, to figure out what you want to do. You don't always know exactly what you're going to do, because I didn't know exactly where I was going to go. I just kind of knew where I wanted to head. So I'm going to go back in a bit of a time warp to summer of 1985, and perhaps cultural trivial questions today. And as you may know, some of you may have, for most of you, Live Aid was probably just some history. Some of us actually remember it. But in the summer of 1985, they had for the first annual American Lousy Break Society. It was a new group that had formed, people like Sonny Gruber, and, know all these names, Leonard Capano, Don Nelson, started this organization. It's a professional shark research group. And we just had our 35th meeting here just in July, and I'm actually now the president of the society, which tells you how far I've gone. Well, this first one they had in 85, I couldn't go because I just finished grad school, and you guys in grad school, I had no money, so I was not going. Live Aid would have been kind of cool, but I was a grad student, I had no money to go there. So this is the Emperor of Japan at the time, Akihito. And a little known fact, but he actually is an ichthyologist. He studies fish. That's what he's actually an expert in gobies. Now he's up in his 80s now, but he was actually quite an ichthyologist in his own right. Well, they had this conference, the Indo-Pacific Fish Conference, in July of 1985. And this was the Super Bowl, World Series, NBA championship, in my field at the time. This was the one to go to. And of course, I didn't have money for that. I certainly had money to go to wherever the meeting was there. I didn't have money to go to Philadelphia or England. But what they had for this conference was they had funding for 12 U.S. scientists to attend this from the National Science Foundation. Now, I tell students this today because a lot of conferences, and I'm sure probably some of your professional conferences, they have student grants. You can apply just so you're competing against other students. Well, think about you're competing against your advisors and some of the best people in the world. That's what I was looking at. But it was I felt like, well, what's the worst they're gonna tell me? There's no funding to go here. God knows there's no funding to go here, but well, there's a chance it might, what the hell? So I put in an application, and I still don't really know to this day that I was one of the 12 people they selected. I was the only one that didn't have a PhD. In fact, my master's, the ink hadn't even dried on the signature page yet. But it made a huge difference because I was willing to try, and I thought, well, what's the worst I'm gonna fail at it? Big deal, let's pick up, pull up my shoes and keep going. Well, it ended up being like the best thing I ever did because I went to this conference. I met some people that became very influential in my life, in my career, professional career. But one of the key highlights there that really always stuck with me is one of the nights there, then my advisor, Greg Kaye, who was one of the people they selected, I mean, that's who I'm competing with, and he was one of the guys they picked. And another colleague, Dick Lund, sat me down one night and he said, like, so what's this deal about South Africa and PhD? And I'm like, well, I don't think I can get it. I mean, that's smart, really. And he spent a couple hours over sake and some sushi and basically convinced me and instilled in me the confidence that I could do this. And it was just basically career altering, that whole experience. So again, I kind of tell you, these are just things I picked up along the way that I think is important to share with you, because you never know where an opportunity comes. I mean, if you get that opportunity, seize it. Because here's yet another opportunity I had that I didn't anticipate at all. Now, I told you the last story to bring things forward to back to some of the stuff I do now. This is Tanzania, but it could be a number of any countries in Africa or anywhere in the world, really, where you have essentially one country but two worlds. And on the one hand, you have these sort of nice luxury areas here, beautiful beachfront areas looking on the Indian Ocean. And then you have literally, this is literally 25 meters away from this here. And here you have people just living on the edge. Okay, and I say living on the edge, I mean, they're not starving or anything, but you get up every day, you have to go fishing. For these people, if you don't go fish, you don't catch it, then you're not going to eat. These people just call up and order room service. And I shouldn't say too much, actually, this was a hotel that we stayed at. But it was literally because, well, they had to stay somewhere, and it wasn't really safe to stay over here. And this was another situation where literally, I showed up at this place here, and it was an off-season thing. So I thought, okay, stay there. I mean, you don't see the guys with the machine guns on either side of the place. And they say, like, well, you don't go out here, go here, because we probably won't see you again. So I called my colleagues up from the Tanzanian Fishery Service. I said, hey, I'm here, let's go look at some fish. So they come by and they show up here, and there's three of them. They said, great, let's go to the fish market. I said, okay, great, let's just walk out here, we'll go around the corner. I'm like, well, I thought I couldn't do that. Don't worry about it. And we would literally walk around the corner, and this is what you're looking at here. And this is amazing. It's the same type of thing. There's just amazing stuff people are catching there. They're bringing in all kinds of weird and wonderful sharks and rays. But it just, again, I've seen this before, but it's just striking at how different one place can be. So literally, like just feet away, you can be in a whole different world here. That's why I kind of look at this as like, when they have the one country, it's two very different worlds. And it's fascinating to me because just how people live in these different environments here. Now this is my friend Abdullah, my young friend Abdullah, who I met this year in Zanzibar. And he's a young man. He works for the Wildlife Conservation Society in Tanzania. And he's been out monitoring the fish markets and stuff. And unlike me, he speaks Swahili, that's his main language, but he also speaks excellent English. And so we went around a number of the fish markets. But to give you an idea of like how dedicated this guy is to what he's doing, how passionate he is, one of the days we're going to the fish market, Abdullah's like usually 15 minutes early, so he's usually down there waiting for me. And so I'm down there, I'm waiting for him, and he's like he's like 5 minutes late. I don't care, it's not that much to do. Probably still be fish down at the market. So he shows up there, and we started talking with him, and he says, oh, I should back up a second. It's like 110 degrees. It's hot. You're just off the tropics. It stinks. It smells. And he started talking. He said, well, I lost my phone. And like with these guys, their phone is everything. They may not have anything else, but everybody in a lot of these countries has their phone. It's amazing. And they get great reception too. That's even more meetings. I can't even get reception half the time out in Trinidad for crying out loud, but I can go to Zanzibar and get perfect reception. So I started talking to him, I said, well, where did you lose it? Let's go try to find it. He goes, oh, well, he goes, actually it got stolen. I go, oh, well, we should go report this. And as he's explaining this, man, I see this patch on his shoulder with like this betadine like dripping out of it. And I'm like, what happened? Well, when the guys like robbed me, they stabbed me. They're called like a panga, it's like a machete. So it's not like a little knife. They basically hit him here, and if he'd been over here, he'd probably have been dead. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the doctor, we gotta get you to the doctor. He said, oh no, I've been in the emergency room all night. I just walked 6 kilometers so I could meet you here. This guy walked 6 kilometers in 110-degree heat so he could meet me on time. He's 5 minutes late. He's apologizing to me, and I'm like, no, listen, this was amazing. And I'm listening to this young person tell me this. I'm like, don't worry. I'll go get the samples today. I can figure it out. I've been there enough days. I'd already been there for a little while. I kind of knew enough around. And so I put him in a cab, gave the guy some money. I said, don't let him out, take him home, and like make sure he gets home. So I called his bosses up there and who were concerned, checked up on him and stuff. But it was amazing when you think about the dedication. I mean, like, you know, you get these sort of excuses like students can't make your lab meeting or something. It's like, well, I was like, okay, Della got stabbed in water. And one of my colleagues down in Long Beach, Dave Chris Lowe, kind of told the students after I gave this talk at their conference this summer, he says, like, unless you're stabbed, I don't want to excuse me. This guy, Della can get through here. But the thing I want to say is the passion about a guy like Abdullah, again, it's reinvigorating to somebody like me, and like something I didn't know. And like we grew up listening to Queen back in the 70s and stuff. When I was flying to Zanzibar, I happened to watch Bohemian Rhapsody. Who knew Freddie was from Zanzibar, for crying out loud? Did anybody hear that? No, you guys know? I had no idea. So, but he's from Zanzibar, and they're really proud of that. Probably more proud now that the movie came out. Because you go into town and they show like where Freddie was born, this is where he went. And of course, after Abdullah got stabbed and went down the market, I had to stop off at Freddie Mercury's Bar and Grill and have a few cold ones, because it was kind of a rough day that day. But a good friend of mine I've also known since the 80s, Gavin Naylor, he's also from Tanzania. He grew up in Serengeti. And he was born and raised there, essentially. And he runs the Shark Research Center at the University of Florida. He runs the director of the Tree of Life Project. He's very prominent in the shark research world as well. And then, of course, Freddie Mercury here. But Abdullah, he's kind of a famous guy in training. He's never going to probably be performing at Wembley Stadium in front of 100,000 people. In fact, I don't even know if the guy can sing. Abdullah, I didn't even think he'd know if he has any social media accounts. He does this stuff because he's passionate about what he's doing. And in his own way, he's making a contribution to the wildlife in Tanzania by going out there. And that's where it really comes from, the heart, where he's out there, wants to be there, wants to do stuff, wants to contribute. Again, he's not going to be running a major shark research program probably in the United States. I don't think he's ever been out of Zanzibar. But in his own way, the stuff he's gathering is going to go towards our national plan of action for sharks. He's going to be doing something that's going to be important, that's going to have meaning in what they do. And it's not focused on how many likes or clicks or tweets he does. It's all comes because he wants to do something that contributes to his family, to his friends, to his community. That's why he's doing this. He's doing this because this is a lost shark. This was a species that was described by some Australian colleagues of mine, Carcharanus obsolaris, which translates from "to lost." This shark actually used to occur in Southeast Asia. This thing disappeared. We haven't seen one since 1934. In fact, it's only known from 3 museum specimens. And this shark was declared extinct this year. My parents are fortunate they're still around. This has gone extinct in their lifetime. Abdullah does this stuff because of things like this. This is a sawfish. This used to be very common in East Africa and a lot of places around the world. The only places you can really find these anymore is in the U.S. and in Australia, where they have protection, mostly in Florida and that part of the southeast U.S. Much of its range, I was fortunate when I was in Africa in the late 80s, I still see a couple of these. There's a good chance Abdullah will never see one of these in his lifetime. In his career. His kids almost certainly will, unless there's some major changes And it's not just fishing, but it's habitat loss in a lot of these areas, because a lot of the areas where these particular things occur in mangroves are disappearing. He does this because of things like this wedgefish, which is a project I was working on there with him. These things are still kind of common to see, but they were just recently at the recent conference of parties, the CITES meeting last month. These things were all listed as critically endangered because in large areas of their world, these things are disappearing. You can still find these in the markets, but this is what we're going. This is the kind of thing that he's working for. Why he goes out when he's been stabbed with all things to be there. He wants to make his contribution. He's doing something bigger than himself. Several decades ago, I chose my path in life, the journey I wanted to take. It was definitely a road less traveled. But I've never looked back, and I've always never regretted the decisions I made in my life and the direction I went. And I discovered things about myself that I never knew I had. I went off to look for sharks. What I found, I've tried to convey to you today, is far more than I ever would have imagined when I was growing up here in high school. Much like that, my friend Abdullah, my young friend Abdullah, he's starting his path in life and his journey now, in the direction he plans to go. My final question to you young people here tonight, have you chosen your path in life? That's all I have to say. Thank you. I can answer questions. Yeah.
So on that shark that you found, and you said it was a new genus, do you know the characteristics of?
I'm sorry, what?
Do you know the characteristics of like how that created, like about that shark apart?
How to tell it apart? Well, because
It's a new genus.
well, my German colleague named the new genus before me a couple of years, actually knew a couple of years ago for that, but it was a pretty new genus. I just learned a couple of years old. This was the second species in that genus that we found. So, and that was just one of those ones you just knew. You know, most of the time it's not like that, but that was one you just knew.
I heard a cool fact, tell me if it's true. The ghost shark, like you showed a picture of, I know that's a generic name, so I don't know specifically. This was off the coast of Greenland, I heard. This particular shark didn't come into fertility until it was 150 years old.
Oh, you're thinking of sleeper shark.
400 years.
Yes.
So that's true, there are such sharks.
Well, it got a lot of news coverage. But I talked to people, they tried this new technique called bomb radiocarbon, looking at isotopes and atmospheric radiation. I talked to people who actually know about that stuff, and they said, well, probably not. That could be anywhere from, it could be that size at 50 years or 500 or somewhere in between. So, but it got a lot of play, it got a lot of media play for 500 years. But when I talk to people actually, and I can't explain the details on it, people actually know that stuff.
It's like radiocarbon from an ear bone.
Yeah, it's like, well, basically what they looked at is when they used to do atmospheric nuclear testing in the 50s and early 60s, these things would lay down markers in their body and the cartilage, and that's what they used. And I think they used the eye lens to try to tell with that. And so that was what they basically used. So it was, so yeah, I hate to like puncture the balloon in that one. But sometimes the media tends to embellish things. Probably shouldn't, but it sells newspapers, I guess, or gets people to put a tweet, whatever. So, yeah.
In terms of threats to sharks, is it mostly the direct shark finning for kind of food and soup and stuff, or is it more the bycatch in commercial fishing?
It's, well, first of all, in Asia, nothing goes back. Everything's kept. And the finning, the big issue is in some cases it's targeted, they keep the whole animal. Where it gets controversial, at least in my mind, is when they're just like catching the shark, keeping the fins and throwing the carcass back. Now, I no doubt that goes on, and I know things like blue sharks, which actually have been referred to as sort of the bunny rabbits of the ocean, because they actually can be pretty prolific. But the meat's generally not as well liked, so that's one species they tend to cut the fins off. But my experience in like the more local fisheries, they'll cut the fins off and the meat gets used. But again, I know it's not, they don't do that everywhere. In a lot of places they don't. In a lot of these places, I showed like tonight, when I was traveling, I spent 2 months going through East Africa earlier this year, and I'm going back in November. And what's interesting is the only really sort of, other than myself and a couple of friends, colleagues I was traveling with, the only sort of people in all these places that are non-black Africans are Chinese buyers. And they are like everywhere I went. And I've seen that for years going back to Africa. So there's a lot of going on, activity that's not illegal, but I don't know, like this, I mentioned squid fish, nobody really knows. They're just going on, nobody's paying any attention to it.
So Dave, as you are finding all these sharks, are you keeping specimens and putting them somewhere, or?
Yes.
So what does that look like
Well,
for you?
when you collect and you describe a new species, it's literally, it's a historical document. People don't realize that. And so, like, if you go to the California Academy of Sciences for a number of my species, like my MIIS, her shark's up there, so I can go back in the collection there and I can say, yeah, this one's named after you. And they put it into what's called a type collection. And so it's just like a historical document. They keep that specimen there because anytime you collect something that might be new, you have to go check the references for it.
Right.
So it's really important. A lot of times we run into, when I'm in some of these countries, they don't have the same resources we do in some of the Western countries. And some of them are actually pretty good, but some places they don't have as much. You try to find a museum that they can keep the stuff in. Sometimes in Africa, things will go to South Africa because they have a good, well internationally recognized fish collection there. Because it's really hard to do is if you don't have something to reference to work off of.
So you don't throw it in your suitcase and bring it home with you?
Yes, I do. I've been known to do that. I have a nice cute picture somewhere I can show you, like a suitcase literally packed with stuff. Yes, with things. There's been more than a few trips where I literally ditched all my clothes, except I used some I damped in like alcohol just to keep the things moist, shoved it into the suitcase and literally just wore the clothes back I wore and ditched everything else.
Wow.
So that's, I kind of got a little carried away, especially on the grass. I didn't have any clothes anyway. So. But a lot of these fish markets I go to, because they're so grungy, by the time, I take like old tennis shoes and stuff, because when I'm done with it. And because I don't even tell you the stuff you wander through sometimes. You don't think about it, just get focused in on what you're doing. But I feel like, so it's, I've had a few suitcases full of stuff. Anyone else have any questions?
All right, well, let's wrap it up. If anyone wants to hang out and say hello,
Yeah.
more than welcome to. Thanks again.